Yeah, there's way more. Adversaries want to be able to accomplish their goals with as little effort and as little resources as possible. So I think you nailed it with your observation of there's way other ways to, pop something than to go through esoteric stunt hacking.
Hello and welcome to the CyberWhy Pod, where security, technology, and business meet. TCW Pod is your go-to auditory and visual feast summarizing the captivating world of cybersecurity. On this week's pod, we bring you a monthly roundtable where humor meets hacker culture. We dive into the latest in cybersecurity news, trends, and mishaps, offering up a unique flavor of commentary for your consumption. Whether you're a seasoned InfoSec professional, a budding hacker, or just a tech enthusiast hungry for knowledge, strap in for a ride through the cyber wilderness. With the CyberWhy podcast, you're not just listening to a show, you're joining a movement. Where else can you find cutting-edge cyber insights served with a heaping helping of irreverence and humor? Only here, only now. Welcome to the CyberWhy podcast. All right. On today's CyberWhy podcast, I have our usual group of analysts and miscreants. First, I'd like to introduce Rick Holland to this month's show. He's my main man and co-host, the great Rick Holland. He's as good as they come at understanding the motivations and tactics of nation states, cyber criminals, and threat hunters alike. The Baron of Barbecue, the Terror of Texas, and the best girl dad outside of yours truly. Please welcome Rick Holland. Rick, how are you today?
Good. I like that. I like that intro, Baron of Barbecue. In fact, I put this hat on as a result of that intro. So
you knew I was going that way for you today. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Adrian Sanabria. Adrian is the CyberWhy's resident tech wizard. He understands and deep dives all things bits, bytes, and blinking lights. He makes sure that the TCW team goes as deep as we do wide. He's the angel of anger, the harbinger of rage, and the best hair model straight out of the movie Zoolander. Let's welcome Adrian Sanabria to the show. Hello, Adrian. How are you, bud?
Doing good. Yeah, I'm the old guy hanging out the window of the car that is cybersecurity, yelling at the other drivers.
Mm-hmm. There it is. And I love the, you definitely look like you should be in the gasoline fight scene on Zoolander. For those that are younger and don't know the gasoline fight scene, definitely Google it, look it up on YouTube. It's worth looking at, right, Adrian?
I just showed that to somebody yesterday. I just introduced somebody to that just yesterday.
I was going to make a hand model joke, but with wonderful hair like that versus mine, I'm just jealous, but that's what it comes down to.
Hair is definitely.
I think it's follicular harassment, actually.
You prepped that. That did not come off the Chrome Dome.
No, that's a joke that I've used before. When everyone has amazing hair and they come around me, I say that. So I didn't prep it, but it's always ready to go.
Last but not least, we have a Katie Teitler-Santullo. She's the CyberWhy's strategic savant. She navigates the complex web of cybersecurity vendor marketing policies, practices, and human impacts. Katie has a passion for chocolates, is by far the kindest member of the CyberWhy, and generally finds herself rolling her eyes at the stupidity of the rest of our crew. Please welcome our ray of sunshine in a otherwise dark studio, KT. How are you, KT?
I'm fine. I'm pretty sure the chocolate comment constitutes that we go as wide as we go deep.
Also well played, and I wonder how prepped that
was.
It
actually wasn't prepped, but as you were mentioning it to Adrian, I thought, yeah, everybody's going to think I'm just sitting over here eating chocolate, which might not be inaccurate on certain days.
Well, I did say that you're the smartest one, so I will give you credit for coming up with that off the cuff.
I think
Rick,
that was a backhanded
comment off the cuff
for Rick. I think that was a backhanded comment, Rick.
100%.
That's all that's ever made.
All right, so I'd like to open the show with some news for the crew. Some of you know this, some of you don't, and certainly for the audience. We have our first ever TCW pod sponsor. So real quickly, I just want to do a 2-second sponsor read. for our brand new sponsor, Material Security. Secure your productivity suite with Material Security. Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace aren't just applications. They're critical infrastructure. These environments are home to all your people, content, and communications. Securing these things require a heavy set of disjointed tasks that leaves blind spots and coverage gaps. Material Security is the only solution purpose-built to address risks across the whole environment with the focus and depth required to make a difference. Material provides a unified suite of cloud email security, user behavior analytics, and data loss prevention purpose-built for M365 and Google Workspace. Material integrates in minutes via Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace APIs with zero downtime. Customers get a single tenant, isolated instance, and complete control over the underlying infrastructure. Material works with organizations of all shapes and sizes. Learn more about their advanced security for your cloud productivity suite at material.security. So let me thank you for them for being our inaugural sponsor. They are fantastic. Please take a moment and go to material.security to learn more about what they do. So yes, applause all the way around. Thank you, Anna and team over at Material. All right. We have a pretty killer set of content this week. We've put out three CyberWise, I think, since we released our last pod, 3 newsletters, and at least 2 or 3 deep thought pieces that we can kind of pick the best and brightest from. So I'd like to open up our commentary today with our opening story of canceling and uncanceling of DEFCON. Within the last 4 weeks since our last show, there was actually a canceling of DEFCON. I don't know how many of you have been to DEFCON for a long time or not, but DEFCON, the running joke for the last, as long as I can remember, is everybody always posts on forum boards, DEFCON is canceled. It's always a running joke, but they actually did it this year. So the story behind this is that Caesars ended a 25-year relationship with DEFCON, Caesars Properties, citing a strategy change. They didn't give any information about what that really means. They left DEFCON without a venue for its 32nd annual conference. So that gave DEFCON about 7 months to find a new location, which I don't know how many of you have actually attempted to do a major event like a DEFCON style event before. But that's not easy. The exact reasons for the termination remain undisclosed. Caesars is really giving no information about the cancellation and the reasoning behind why. I think it took less than a week until DEFCON moved to the Las Vegas Convention Center and the Sahara Hotel, giving them much more space for new activities. It features a proper food court, large indoor LCD wall. So probably a better outcome than had they not been canceled.
I have a question.
But I want to, hit me. Go ahead.
Did all this happen before or after they paid a big ransom?
And there's Adrian leading right into my next commentary. Caesars Entertainment was the victim of a cyber attack in 2023. This all happened, I believe, in February timeframe of 2024. And so that's kind of the question I had for y'all to try to kick around here is, do we think this had anything to do with the massive ransomware payment that Caesars and MGM got faced with? MGM paid a massive, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, ransom payment where Caesars decided not to.
Yeah, I thought it was 20 million.
20 million, 25, 15, I don't care. It's a lot of millions, right? So do you guys think that Caesars is doing this finally because they're worried about actually hosting hackers in their properties? Do you think that was the cause here?
I mean, we can only guess, right? DEFCON almost every year has had issues with.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just checked it. Caesars did pay the ransom, Tyler.
There you go. So I had my data backwards. Not uncommon for me. So Caesars paid the ransom.
Yeah.
Did MGM pay the ransom?
No.
Okay.
So you had it backwards.
Swap that. All right. No problem.
Yeah.
So Caesars paid the ransom, and now there are how many millions of dollars impacting their bottom line. And at the end of the day, they have to make the decision. So from a timeline perspective, Adrian, let me give you a timeline on this one before you weigh in on whether you think this actually, the ransom actually hit them enough to scare the hell out of them. August 2023, the initial attack and data exfiltration against Caesars occurred. September 2023, Caesars Entertainment publicly confirmed the breach. October 2023, breach notifications were sent to affected individuals. So this is still fresh on their mind. It was the attack Specific details of the attack are still unclear, but it's strongly suspected to have involved a complete ransomware of key components within the Caesars system. Industry sources and investigative reports often refer to it as a ransomware attack. So we're not saying it is a ransomware attack. We're saying it sounds like, or alleged, right? We have to make sure we use that. But the attackers apparently have stolen all of the loyalty program database, including names, driver's license, social security numbers. The impact is massive to Caesars. And I think it makes logical sense for them to be like, hey, we don't want to be affiliated with this scenario. I'm not shocked that they shut this thing down.
It could be. It could be also that leadership, doesn't understand it's even more than nuances, right? Between the hackers who show up for this convention and the hackers that, made them pay $20 million. We still have that issue of, understanding, people having different definitions for hacker, right? Some equating it with criminal and some, sticking to the, kind of the classic definition, which is refers to a set of skills.
There are there have been plenty of issues in years past with people, both who are conference attendees as well as non-conference attendees. I was reading the other day an article from 2017 that talked about how, quote, Las Vegas was getting ready for DEFCON. And it interviewed people who work at the hotels who are saying, there are going to be plenty of hackers and cybersecurity specialists. I know to use cash, not my credit cards. I'm not going to use an ATM. I'm concerned about using my wireless, when I'm there. So you can look back over the years where there have been controversy, and part of it is, due to the lack of information about what DEFCON is really about and who the majority of people are who attend. But I think there's also been a little bit of, just to be perfectly honest, a little bit of foolish behavior at times.
Yeah.
And that
a little bit.
Okay, I'm not.
There have been incidents.
There have been some incidents, and I think, especially in light of everything that happened with the ransomware and what have you, that they're concerned about the perception of what DEFCON could bring, because it's not the most lucrative event for them. You've got these people attending the conference. They're not going out and spending big bucks on food or drink or gambling or what have you. They're there for completely different purposes.
Well, with the exception of Tyler.
Oh, that's true.
Well, we know Tyler's gambling habit. So
easy. All right. Does this cancellation and subsequent moving of it, what does it say about the future of DEFCON? Do you think this impacts the future of DEFCON in any way? Obviously, now they have a new location at the LVCC, the Las Vegas Convention Center and Sahara Hotel. Makes total sense. Do we think this is going to have a positive and negative impact on DEFCON going forward? Do you think I personally think this is a positive thing for DEFCON? I'm glad we got out from under Caesar's thumb in this particular scenario, because now we have bigger square footage at the convention center. I mean, I have some of the numbers here and I'll get to them in a minute. We're talking 20, 30,000 people converging in Las Vegas for this long weekend event. It just got to the point where it was stagnant and difficult in a single hotel. People had massive lines. Adrian, I don't know when the last DEFCON you actually attended was, but what was your experience recently at one of them?
I mean, it just became spread across too many properties, and it became a challenge to find things. DEFCON is, at least in the cybersecurity world, pretty unique in that it has, like, the villages are bigger than the conference itself. I think at this point, like the number of villages they have, coordinating all those villages, finding a place for them, and having to increasingly spread across multiple properties just made it tough on attendees. Yeah. The hike to get to different places, like having to go outside to go from place to place through the heat. It's more of a slog. And, I think it's, coordinating with one venue is tough enough, but across multiple, even if they're owned by the same company, for anybody who's run an event, obviously I have not run an event anywhere near this size besides Knoxville, might hit 500 attendees this year. But that is the toughest part. It's the most expensive piece of the planning. It's the toughest to coordinate. You're going to bring in some people to do some things. They might require you to use them for some things. We don't have unions here in Tennessee. They have unions there in California. There's so much to have to deal with. So if you can consolidate to one larger place, I think that's a win. And I think whoever takes on DEFCON, probably is going to be putting in more work and biting off more than they would with like the dog products, the pet products conference that is typically or for several years occurred at the same time as Black Hat.
That was great. I love that.
You remember that?
I do. There was this rainbow poodle 2 years that was just so much fun.
Yeah. And it's
and they're all getting pushed around in their little doggy right. carriages and everything. It's incredibly awkward and weird to have a bunch of black hat and white hat hackers running around with a bunch of poodles and multicolor. It's just so bizarre.
But taking on DEFCON is a burden. Probably a burden for whoever decides to host them and take their money. I don't know if they pay more for that or. But we've all seen the internal memos.
The insurance. That's interesting. Right. Like, how much more is insurance coverage for that event versus the dog show type of thing?
Yeah, I don't know who does more damage to the facilities. A bunch of dogs going to the bathroom all over the place, or a bunch of hackers probably doing the same thing. So who knows?
You stole my comment.
Oh man,
did I talked over yours?
I went to the CISO summit at Black Hat last year, and I had lunch. And Jeff Moss joined our table. And we actually started talking to him about the logistics of the conference, both Black Hat and DEFCON. And the thing that he was telling us is just there's only a couple places in the country that can handle the scale. So I think it's pretty impressive that they were able to turn it around as quickly as they did. Orlando was another area that he had mentioned.
Interesting.
I'm not a huge fan of Orlando for business travel anyway, because there's so many families there. It makes it really slow in the airports and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's impressive they turned it around that quickly.
It's amazing because I used to, again, like Adrian, not events this size, but 1,000-person events. And even with those, you had to be booking your venue 1.5 to 2 years in advance. So it's amazing that they found something.
Yeah, for sure.
It is.
For sure. So Adrian's down in Orlando, so I'm sure he can comment about the kids running all over the place.
Yeah, I mean Orlando's huge and spread out. So I'm actually about as far as you can get from like the Disney properties and Universal and all that. That's on the other side of the city. But certainly driving in that other part of the city, like it's a totally different town from this side. We're in a suburb, of course, like we're not in Orlando proper, but yeah, I can see Orlando being able to handle something like that. It's there's trains, there's buses, public transportation. It's a huge, sprawling, spread out city, and there's a lot of event locations like that. That's where InfoSec World is, right?
It is indeed. And I try to avoid that conference if I can help it, simply because it's in Orlando. Hey, we already commented on my predilection for gambling. I'm obviously a Vegas fan. For those of you that are watching the video, you'll see me decked out in my UNC gear today, top to bottom, head to toe, literally hat and shirt today, specifically to be cheering on my UNC Tar Heels in the NCAA tournament. So, obviously, I want it to stay in Vegas. I think it should stay in Vegas. But I want to bring up a couple of games I wanted to play on this topic real quickly. So my first DEFCON was DEFCON 6 or 7 in 1998. I think it was at I believe it was the Plaza Hotel. Adrian, do you remember when your first DEFCON was?
It was probably 2009. So about 10 years after your first one.
Rick, do you remember your first DEFCON, the first time you took a slice of that insanity?
I went to 2 at Alexis Park. Was that mid-2000? I don't know the timing on it. I just like going out by the pool out there. But yeah, 2 at the Alexis Park. And then I took a long hiatus from DEFCON just until the past 5 years or so.
And Katie, let's hear your first one. Do you remember it?
I've only been to one, and it was 2017.
Gotcha. So I'm the OG. So 2017, you were at Caesar's Palace. You actually never saw any of the old school stupidity and insanity they used to come with, which counts your blessing, because it got ugly and bad for most of the AP years. Were pretty gross, Rick. I don't know if your experience was the same as mine, but they got pretty gnarly in that window. But let me ask you guys a quiz. Here's a quick quiz. Without cheating, how many DEFCON events has there been in Las Vegas total?
Well, it's all
This year's is,
right.
yes. So this year's is DEFCON what?
But they probably missed. Do the virtuals count? Didn't they have at least one? That
Nope. The virtuals don't count.
In Las Vegas physically.
Yep. The answer is
27.
Adrian, what's your guess?
I'm doing math. Hold on.
Cue the Charlie Day meme.
Let me give you a tip. Take this
2009.
DEFCON's number, and then there was one virtual one, and you get the answer.
Yeah, but I don't know this DEFCON's number.
Tricky.
So,
For those of you that are watching on video, you can see the smoke coming out of his ears. 33 is the correct answer. After all that, you were still wrong. All right. And so here's the more fun question. Out of 33 live DEFCONs that have taken place in Vegas, can you tell me how many different hotels they took place in?
No clue. I'm going to say 12 just because.
Would not be good at the DEFCON trivia at DEFCON.
It's funny. Like famously at Hacker Jeopardy, nobody knew the answer to what TCP port, what's the default port for Telnet. And all us OGs are like, oh my God, you not know that. But I'm going to guess 11.
Take a shot, guys.
11.
Yeah. 11, 12. Rick?
13.
You're all under 17 different hotels in 33 years of being in Las Vegas.
Did you see that strategy, though? They sandwiched me so I could only be wrong unless it was...
That's straight out of Price is Right. Yeah, they made it so you couldn't win. So that includes many of which were demolished, including the Sands Hotel and Casino, which was the very first DEFCON 1 and 2, 93, 94, was demolished in 96. The Tropicana Hotel for DEFCON 3, which was in 1995, is expected to be shut down April 2nd. So maybe even right around the time this pod is airing.
That's for baseball, right? That's what it's getting replaced with.
That's correct. It became the Park MGM Hotel. Oh, sorry, that's the next one. That's the final stage of shutdown. You're right, because it's going to be the new baseball stadium. Then you got the Monte Carlo for DEFCON 4 in 1996, which technically was shut down and became the Park MGM, but they didn't blow it up. The Aladdin, demolished in 98. The Plaza, which, God forbid, for DEFCON 6 is still in operation in the downtown strip. Then we had a handful in the Alexis Park Hotel, which is the non-gambling casino or non-gambling hotel off strip. Then the Riviera for 4 years in the mid-2000s. Then the Rio off strip hotel and casino, which is still in operation. The Riv closed in 2015, by the way. Then we start the modern era, right? The Caesars, Paris, Bally's, Planet Hollywood, Flamingo, all of Caesars owned properties started in about 2015 timeframe. And actually Rio is also owned by Caesars. So even going back to 2011. So about 12 years of relationship with Caesars has now been flushed thanks to a bunch of hackers that ransomware Caesars. So the next topic I want to bring up, guys, the next topic is something that I see happening way too frequently. And this is that once every 6 months or so, and it seems to be happening more often than that, comment that comes out about analysts being pay to play. And we've all talked about this. We're all former analysts, and I don't know about you guys, but I never once took a direct dime to make a comment about a specific company or product, good, bad, or indifferent. But there was a bit of a story called that got put out by a company called Vectra.ai. I believe it was the CEO there, and I'll let you guys double check me on that while I'm talking. But the CEO there wrote an article called "Forrester Got It Wrong: The Flaws of the Network Analysis and Visibility Wave." And this was a piece on Vectra's website that criticizes Forrester's methodology and their network analysis and visibility, their NAV wave report, where Vectra argues that Forrester places too much emphasis on specific abilities, decryption capabilities, lack of focus on AI techniques, and has an, quote, outdated approach to measuring the Forrester results, the wave results. They basically believe that Forrester's flawed. Their assessment model is flawed, and it misleads customers in selecting the best threat detection solution in this particular case. I wanted to open it up to this floor. I feel like we could do a bigger piece on this. We'd probably do an hour on how to properly do analyst relations, but this is pretty much this article. And if you guys take a look at it in your free time, this is pretty much a lesson in how not to work with analysts. Specifically, when you get the mediocre or not perfect result you're looking for in a wave, this is exactly how not to handle the situation. From a bullet by bullet vantage point, they just chose to make so many mistakes in their commentary, and they were highly argumentative, shooting at not only the specifics, details that may be flawed, but just attempting to take down Forrester as a whole. Rick, as a former Forrester analyst, as I am myself, I would love to know your commentary and thoughts on where you think they went wrong. Obviously they made a mistake, but what might have caused this kind of response?
Well, I hope they've matured their program, because this got a lot of attention on social media, although it came from summer before last. So it's not a brand new piece. And I actually know, ironically, I'd done some strategy days with the author of the blog itself. And being on vendor land for many years since, I do appreciate the position that people are in when they're responsible for analyst relations. And for those that don't live in the industry analyst world, like we all had done at points in our career, like people will lose their jobs, unfortunately, over the performance in Magic Quadrants and waves. Probably more so in those than other ones that are out there. So I think you need to kill industry analysts with kindness, if you will, and build a relationship with them, and then try to influence their criteria on the next wave, or actually more important is on inquiries, because the analysts take inquiries all the time, more frequently than they produce waves and MQs. So I agree, we could do a very deep dive on this for pro tips that are out there, but this is not the way that I would have handled it. Although I can appreciate the pressure that people are on, and when the sales force is getting asked, why did we perform here? They need their battle card on how to respond to these types of analyst methodologies.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that it was a year ago, because what brought up the topic was actually a thread I saw on LinkedIn where people were making comments about analysts being paid to play. And then this one kind of pops up. Vector kind of pops up as the de facto, oops, you screwed up approach, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about specifically is, are analysts pay to play? Obviously, we're going to be biased. The four of us are former analysts. I presume none of you took direct payment for specific pieces, but are analysts pay to play? Katie, can you give me your TLDR? Do you think analysts are pay to play? How do you kind of, imagine or define pay to play in this particular scenario? And look, certain analyst firms take money to write reports. Does that make them pay to play?
So I have a slightly different perspective than the three of you, because I was not only an analyst, I was an analyst at a smaller firm, but I was in sales at Forrester for almost 5 years. And I was specifically on the new and emerging vendor team. And our motto, our guidance to these young emerging vendors was always, hey, you can't pay us enough money to get into a wave. What you can do is engage with analysts. What you can do is ask their opinion. What you can do is work with them to hone your strategy. And if you're collaborating, if you're listening, you have a better chance of being top of mind. That will not guarantee you a spot in a wave. There are certain criteria. That will not guarantee, even if you get in a wave, you'll be ranked above others. But if you're working together, you will 100% be in the analyst periphery, at least. Now, I worked at Forrester. I did not work at Gartner. So, of course, we had plenty of stuff to say about Gartner at the time. But the reality is I work for a vendor now, too, and you got to get on their good side. I mean, we all want to say...
Katie, so where does it become pay to play? And this is the gray area. I'm going to take the counterpoint. I don't believe in the counterpoint, but I'm going to take the counterpoint for sake of discussion in this conversation. And I'm going to try not to throw my microphone across the room like I just did accidentally while you were talking. So if I take the counterpoint here and I say, and here, I'll tell you, even point blank, as an analyst in my life, I've taken free phones. I've taken free tablets. I've taken, sweatshirts and beautiful, pieces of swag clothing that were high-end pieces of clothing. Does that make me a paid-to-play analyst? I personally don't believe that I changed what I would have wrote or written specifically for the results. But at the same time, like, do you see, the conflict of interest is super clear. So where do you define that line, and how do you create a situation where it's super, I guess, evident to the audience that it's not pay to play, even though analysts like me didn't change anything. So I do know some firms have a firm line. You cannot take anything above X number of dollars, right? Other firms do not have that requirement. So how do we handle that? How do we handle that situation as an analyst group?
It's always going to be there. It doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what anybody says to people who believe it's pay to play. It's almost a religious argument at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So I gave a, the keynote that me and Haroon did back in 2019 at Virus Bulletin, the security products we deserve touches on this, kind of covers like all the kind of, poorly kept secrets, and issues with sales and marketing and cybersecurity behind the scenes. And yet kind of our take there was, is it pay to play is the wrong question. Is anybody taking money directly? For favoritism? Of course not. But can more money give you more time to bend the analyst ear and to bias the analyst, to be thinking about your product? Like, even if, it's almost unavoidable. The firm that shows up in your feed the most, that does the most inquiry calls with you, which you can pay to get more time with your favorite analyst. You're naturally going to think of that one because you talk to them more, you know them better, you end up knowing them personally. Let's bring this analyst out for a strategy day, let's find his favorite, flavor of ice cream and, send him a crate of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of it can be direct like that, but that's one of the ways that you monetize your analysts is you sell their time to vendors, so that's going to influence them. That's going to bias them. And that's kind of the take that we took there. But on the flip side of that, I don't think that's at issue here at all. I don't think it's even relevant to the wave here. I think the issue here is most methodologies have some critical issue with them, because they attempt to score products, and a lot of security products, like whether or not it's valuable to you, it depends on a whole lot of factors, so it's really hard to do a review. And I ran into this while doing product reviews, that is useful to everyone. And I think we see issues like this when somebody on one side or on both sides is belligerent about the methodology, refuses to back down, and the wave comes out without that dispute resolved. So we saw this happen several times with NSS Labs, and you can argue that was a major factor in NSS Labs going under, because they lost their lawsuits with CrowdStrike. So FireEye and CrowdStrike both, they got into it over the methodology again. Two vendors wanted to pull out because they didn't agree with the methodology, and in my opinion, they had good reasons for not liking it. And as the testing firm, you say, all right, see ya. We'll just say you didn't agree to be in this wave or in this product test. Like that's the best way to handle this. But instead, somebody said, no, screw you. We're going to keep you in anyway, and you just got to deal with it. And that results in posts like this.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because where do you draw the line? So how do you even consider? Let's flip this a little bit and talk about it as if it were investigative journalism. Okay, I get a product, I do investigative journalism on that product and investigate the efficacy of the particular product, set it up in my lab, test it, tweak it, do all the things that I'm going to do, and then I put that out. Is that journalism? Is that a pay-to-play product report? Is that Like, where do you draw the line as to saying you have zero influence on me? I get to do my review the way I want to do my review. You can't stop me. Nobody can sue me for going and doing a review on my local, restaurant down the road and putting a negative review on that restaurant, right? So I know Forrester, for example, never has backed down. In the whole time I was there, they never backed down on a waive. Their methodology is clean. It's expected to be XYZ 1, 2, 3. You follow it to the letter. And at the end, it's defensible, right? And as long as you're defensible, you're not taking and putting opinion into the argument, then that's where you have it. And so I guess in my opinion, at the end of the day, as long as the methodologies are defensible, I'm sorry, at the end of the day, vendor, you have very little, if any, recourse and say on this.
The difference is investigative journalism is about facts and getting facts out there, but reviews are subjective. It's all opinion. So I think that's the big difference. And the analysts are not investigative journalists. So I think there's some critical.
But I would argue, Adrian, I disagree. I would argue that the way the methodologies for specifically the waives and the MQs are done are investigative. There's specific criteria. Does this do X? What is the capability of X? Where it gets gray, though, is where it gets gray is that it's not a 1 or a 0. It's not a 1 or a 0. It's a 0 to 5. Right. And that's where it gets gray.
I think where it also gets gray is that it is subjective what criteria are included, and that's up to each individual analyst. I know a situation in the last year where an analyst chose to write, I'm not even going to identify whether it was Gartner or Forrester, a quadrant wave, a wave quadrant. The analyst chose to write one of these, did their research, but set out this specific criteria. It changed slightly over the course of this analyst's research process, which is perfectly legitimate. But at the end, there were some vendors who felt like they were screwed out of a good spot because the analyst chose criteria that didn't highlight them in a specific way. So the analyst can choose to highlight specific feature functionality. And so that is not investigative journalism. That is opinion. I don't think there's a way around it when you're ranking products, like Adrian says. But it can't be the same as reporting facts, because if you say, hey, there are 27 feature functionalities that could be included in XYZ platform, and somebody says, well, we've got 33, and somebody else says, well, we only have 12, then you're picking and choosing. So there's no way to get out of some subjectivity.
See, I agree that there has to be, I guess, some subjectivity on the grading criteria specifically. And this is to your point. But at the end of the day, it's as long as you do not put out a mistake in factual component, meaning here's the 10 things I care about within my hotel review. A clean bed, a comfortable bed to me, a hot shower, whatever those 10 criteria are, that's very factual, right? And, they have this or they don't have this feature, right? This is, and obviously maybe that description had some versions of, to me kind of commentary, but you get the point. As long as you keep it as factual as possible, it becomes fairly straightforward to grade. The problem is I get to choose what matters to me, but that doesn't make it less important and less of a factual journalism. Like at the end of the day, my job is to understand the future direction of the market. If I believe that people are moving to the cloud, then I'm going to have those be the more important results.
If you're rating
everything you write is biased.
If you're rating a hotel on how many pens they have, that's clearly not something that's useful to the buyer. That's irrelevant to the buyer. Is it factual? Absolutely, but nobody cares. And that was the issue with a lot of these methodologies. Like in FireEye's case, they designed a product that was supposed to avoid, notifying you, like it was supposed to minimize the number of alerts. And only send you something if it was really, really super important. FireEye's original NX device, like that was the design of it. They didn't want to flood you with alerts. And NSS Labs methodology was whoever sent the most alerts won. So, they were upset with it. They got a really bad score because they intentionally didn't want to flood you with alerts, and everybody else flooded you with alerts. So they ended up the loser. So it was factual, but as a buyer, do I want to buy the product that sends me the most false positives? Probably not.
I think it's actually something we could maybe do a deeper dive on is there's probably a couple angles, but one could be like, how do buyers leverage relationships with analyst firms? And I had customers that would purchase on who was up and to the right the most, which is the absolute wrong way to use a Magic Quadrant or a Forrester Wave. So I think we could probably do a deeper dive on like, okay, you're the CISO, you're the SOC manager, you're the whatever for your domain. Like, how can you use these analyst reports to accelerate your selection process? So I think there's that angle, and obviously we could do a deep dive. I'm sure we got some funny stories on the analyst relations side of things that we've done, or I've been yelled and screamed at before, that sort of stuff.
I have too, and I've been on both sides of the equation, actually, having delivered a wave at Forrester and been the subject of waves and MQs on the other side. So definitely have been along that path multiple times. We'll go ahead and shelf this one because I think what's interesting about this to me is the learnings that we take away from this particular story about how to handle it from the vendor side, how to discover value from the client side, and how not to shoot yourself in the foot. Now, granted, Vector's a year old. The story from Vector's a year old, but it's what triggered it in my mind and why I'm bringing it up today is that I'm constantly seeing this story or this text. I saw it again literally this week in a cybersecurity founders Slack that I'm a member of. Somebody who I very much respect said, screw analysts, they're all pay to play anyways. And it always torques me because we're just not. There's so much more nuance to that debate.
Yep. Yeah, agreed.
All right, we'll leave the analyst stuff behind. I think, Rick, you had a great idea. Maybe you and I and some of the rest of the team here can do a deep dive. Maybe we'll write up a deep dive report on it. Or, hey, better yet, if you'd like to see a deep dive report by some of us on how to handle analyst reports, how to interface with analysts, and actually what a great way to influence analysts without having to pay them to play, comment below, like, subscribe, hit us with the comments and tell us you want to see that. And we'll see what we can pull together for you. So
Tyler,
on the course,
there were a bunch of those a couple of years ago. Anton Chuvakin put one out, and then I put one out, and Javad Malik put one out. So I could go back and dig those up because we all had
Josh
different takes on it.
did one around that time as well, who was also Forrester alum. I did one for Mach 37 probably 8 years ago, and a lot of it hasn't changed there, but there's a lot out there.
Oh, don't look so sad, Tyler.
Some really good content. I'm always sad. No, I think we should pull together this content and take the best of the best and give them kind of a stronger level detail there, guys. Kind of a summary of what to do, the best of breed, right? So yeah, we'll take this offline as a team and we'll figure this out. But back to our pod for today, I'm going to hop to our next story. All right. So our next story here is entitled NIST Stops Enriching NVD. So I don't know how closely the members of the show actually followed this particular story around, but it's pretty disturbing to me, actually. And for those of the audience that don't know or don't live in the vulnerability management space, the NVD is the National Vulnerability Database. It's a collection of vulnerability data that is maintained by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST group. Founded in 2005, there's tons of information in there, including things like security checklist references, software flaws, product names, all sorts of broad components around individual vulnerabilities are kept in this big database. And many of the products you use, if not arguably a vast majority of them, have come to rely on NVD data for their operations and vulnerability database storage. Basically, they look to that as the system of record and the system of authority when it comes to vulnerabilities within software that we have and our CVEs across the board. In February, this story is interesting because in February of this year, just the last few weeks ago, NIST announced that they're working on a consortium to improve the NVD program. And there's been significant delays in the analysis ever since this improvement process was announced. So before February 2024, the NVD was operating as usual, providing deep analysis enrichment for reported CVEs, which are your common vulnerabilities and exposures. Essentially, as a researcher or a hacker or attacker, I may discover a software vulnerability, submit it to CVE and NVD, and it gets enriched with tons of extra information. How risky is it? What are the chances of exploit? What systems does it affect? All sorts of enriched data. On February 12th, a significant number of CVE IDs in the thousands were actually published to the NVD database without analysis, just raw dump, vulnerability and vulnerability data done. February 15th, a banner appears on the NVD website stating that NIST is establishing a consortium to improve the program, and there will be temporary delays in their analysis efforts. To summarize the results of this, since the start of 2024, there have been 6,171 total CVE IDs, vulnerabilities, discovered and published inside of NIST. Inside of NVD. And only 3,625 of them at the time of my research had been enriched by NVD, leaving a gap of 42% of vulnerabilities discovered so far in 2024 have not been analyzed. There's been no meat on the bone. It's just a bare bones amount of data. So basically, the other interesting stat is since February 15th of 2024, 90% of CVEs discovered are still awaiting process and analysis. 90%. The vast majority of vulnerabilities being discovered today are not enriched. There's no value. NVD is falling off a cliff. And we have some graphics here that talk about the amount of CVEs in NVD by status. And you can see over time in these graphs, I'll have super producer Sean put these on the screen for us, but you can see in these graphs just a massive spike after February 15th of vulnerabilities being discovered and not enriched and not actually getting useful data within the NVD system. And there's just no explanation around this. There's a few possible reasons we think may be contributing to it: budgetary constraints, shift in prioritization, maybe some technical difficulties, maybe even an undisclosed policy change, but nobody really knows why this is happening the way it is. And so I'd like to kick it to Rick maybe and ask, is this a big problem in the industry?
I saw Adrian raising his hand up. I saw Adrian put his hand up.
Oh, did Adrian raise his hand? All right, we'll kick it to Adrian instead. All right. So Adrian, is this a problem? Is this a big problem?
I'm not going to overlap with what Rick said is going to talk about probably. I just wanted to add some kind of context to this in that for people who aren't really aware of how vulnerability management works, NVD isn't the only database. Russia's got their own vulnerability database. China's got one. There are other open ones out there. There are some run by volunteer groups, some commercial ones like OSVDB. And NVD every year, misses, the numbers vary. You could argue 30 to 40% of the vulnerabilities that we're aware of out there. And it's a poorly kept secret that some MITRE programs and like NVD, for example, have always been poorly funded, and it's been tough to get, the resources those programs really need to properly do that stuff over the years. I've been hearing grumblings about that for probably 20 plus years now. So but as you say, Tyler, NVD is the one that people tend to default to, so it's the worst one for this to happen to out of all the ones out there, probably. And I'll let Rick pick up from there.
There's been an interesting trend. Going back to Forrester days, I'll just make a quick observation on vulnerability management. When I covered vulnerability management at Forrester, I think, and including the previous role, I had not been in a practitioner role for about 6 or 7 years. And then I became a practitioner again, responsible for vulnerability management. And I'm like, wow, how little has changed in that time that was out there. Now, this was probably 5 years ago. There's been a big trend in the threat intelligence space where there's a lot of commercial providers that have vulnerability intelligence modules that are trying to make up for some of the gaps in NVD, ironically, some of them fed by NVD as well. But Adrian's point's really good. There's a lot of vulns out there that don't make it in there at all. So there's commercial providers. I mean, Cisco acquired Kenna Security, which was doing stuff on the vulnerability side. My old company had a vulnerability intelligence module looking at other things as well. I've seen some of the vendors, Rapid7 had put a blog out basically talking about how this wouldn't really impact them because they have some other capabilities as well. CISA's come out. Of course, CISA's got some of its own stuff going on right now, but there's what is the KEV, known exploited vulnerabilities that are out there. I mean, I think vulnerability management still is a big problem for defenders unless you're in a super homogeneous cloud native environment. Technical debt. I talked about technical debt on the last podcast. Like technical debt is all over this vulnerability stuff here. So this is a really challenging thing for defenders and practitioners.
So I will say, first of all, I do want to take a step back and say thank you, Jay Jacobs, for the graph that we popped up earlier. I forgot to mention who actually, where we borrowed
the
that
awesome
graph from.
Jay Jacobs.
Yes, the amazing Jay Jacobs, for sure. But I do think this is going to have a much deeper impact than people are giving it credit for. And I want to pop up a photo that came from Chris Hughes on Resilient Cyber, and Sean, super producer Sean, go ahead and pop up the photo that I'm pointing at right now on my screen. Look, at the end of the day, NVD is kind of this little component that just holds up so much of not only our vulnerability management tools, but literally anything that has a vulnerability that presents output to you is usually taking the bulk of that data from one of two places: the NVD or the OSV, the open source one, right? The open source vulnerability database. It's usually coming from those two places or one of those two places. And more often than not, because it's NIST, it's usually taken directly from NVD and populated into the tools. And we're seeing tools actually have massive gaps within their vulnerability information today because of this issue. It's just showing a vulnerability ID with no real understanding or depth of how to fix it, what the problems might be. People are having to research their own content. So I think the downstream issue of this is much bigger than we're giving it credit for today.
Yeah. So Rick, I'm curious. This has me and probably a lot of other people wondering, is a government run program the best place for something like NVD to live? And if not, who should run it? And then, can we go back to trusting something like this after it, just kind of without notice, leaves us in the lurch here?
Well, I hate to be cynical and say I'm suspicious of the ability of any government-run program these days of being effective, but I think that's just because the headlines with the government and they can't accomplish anything. So I'm skeptical there. But I mean, there's we'll maybe mention like Wendy and the security poverty line. Speaking of former analyst and brilliant former analyst in the security poverty line, I think a lot of folks do rely on these government programs because they can't afford a commercial provider to have it, unless you had somebody that was open sourcing and giving it to the community. So maybe this kind of talks to Tyler's point about some of the broader implications here, because there's a lot of people that won't pay for a vulnerability intelligence module from X vendor that's trying to do as much as they can in this space. So it does make you worried about the security have-nots. And the security poverty line still impacts very large organizations as well. It's not just SMBs that are impacted there.
I would argue completely that it has to be a government organization. As much of a chances for them to F it up really is, I would argue it has to be, because the incentives and the perversion of incentives that come with a corporate ownership of it just makes it too dirty to be any level of consistency. So the only way to get it done is one of two ways: have the government own it and run it, or have a true open source model where people contribute to it. But in general, that's just a really tough way to get things done, because people aren't going to contribute to it if there's no in it for them more often than not, especially the people that are really doing the bulk of this research, which are the private companies. So Katie, you messaged in our back channel that you have a very cynical take. I'd love to hear what your cynical take on this topic is.
Yeah, so the cynical take here is that the hyper-reliance on NVD is willful ignorance. Because it's incredibly easy to say, well, hey, somebody else, NVD, the authoritative source here in the US, said this is a critical vulnerability. So it's a CYA for those who don't want to do the deeper tailored personal work. And unfortunately, I've seen that at enterprise organizations, companies that want to be able to check the box.
I think it's more than just the criticality, however, right? Like literally just the description data, information like the basics of how to remediate it or fix it or what mitigating factors could come into play. That level of enrichment is also done by the NVD to make what is a very technical thing like SQL injection exists in vulnerability XYZ 123 or app 123 to, hey, here's how you fix it. Here's a mitigating factor. Here's a patch. Here's the version information. All of that enrichment takes time and value. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's also 100% that hyper reliance on it. And I'm not even sure that the entire industry understands what's been going on yet. Because I keep seeing things pop up in various Slack and LinkedIn channels and groups that I'm in. You know, somebody just this last week was like, hey, guess what? The NVD, the CVEs are not getting updated. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Like, this has been going on and people are just realizing it. So if you have a product that is also hyper reliant on CVE data and you haven't picked your head up from your keyboard in a month and a half, you have no idea. And I think there are people out there, a lot of people, a lot of companies that are in that predicament.
Two sides to this coin, Adrian. I'm going to kick it back to you. There's two sides of the coin. How does the vendor fix the problem? Because they don't have the resources. They've relied on NIST to actually enrich NVD and the open source vulnerability databases to remain enriched. They don't want to form their own teams to do this work. So how does a vendor handle the situation? And then flip that coin completely over and say, how does an enterprise buyer handle this exact same situation when they're now giving subpar data?
So, good news, bad news, right? Like I think, vulnerability intelligence, like NVD doesn't have any, secret information that, well, I mean, maybe they get some through submissions, but a lot of the vulnerability data is public information, which is why there's multiple databases. NVD isn't the only one that's able to keep up with this stuff. So I've seen enterprises build their own capabilities to gather vulnerability intelligence. Sometimes the most
such a waste.
Yeah, right. The more modern take on it is to just have a really aggressive patch management program, right? And ignore vulnerability management altogether. So some companies I've seen, are able to get away with that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like companies are going to have to DIY it themselves, or enterprises are going to have to DIY it themselves. I mean, already we've got a good idea of which systems are going to be the targeted ones, are going to be the most critical ones. If people are already doing prioritization and, risk-based vulnerability management, they already, probably know the top 5 places that they want to watch really, really closely. And they probably don't need a tool to do that.
So I do want to ask Rick one additional follow-up question, Rick, because you're the most connected to, and I doubt you have any specific, actually, I'm confident you don't have any specific information. So this is all going to be conjecture and hearsay regardless. But look, the NVD and NIST has not explained any of the reasons. They've remained dark. They've not explained any of the real reasons behind why these changes were made and the potential impact on the industry. Do we have transparency issues within NIST and within the government when it comes to disclosure and finding of vulnerabilities and giving vulnerability information to enterprise? It feels like this is just pulling at a thread that's existed for a long time about disclosure of issues discovered and found and how they actually matter with regard to the enterprise. So do you think there's transparency issues here on the NIST side that we should be worried about?
I'd like to know what's going on. What's the plan? What's the timeline? There has been things that the government has put out, some of the Biden executive order stuff, where they're putting timelines and what needs to happen in this period over 30 days, 60 days, 180 days, whatever the case may be. I definitely would like to see more here. I mean, I think the government in general, because of the bureaucracy, the size may not be as transparent as we would like. I'm thinking out loud here, but we do have friends that have been in the lobbying side and working with the government on export controls, various different Wassenaar, all that sort of stuff. I wonder if some of our friends here might have a little bit more insight, because they are talking to staffers on the Hill and things along those lines, kind of getting some visibility here, that might be a good thread to pull. Because I don't really know what's happening, but I'd like to know a timeline on it, and people know, like, what can we expect and when can we expect it?
Yeah, I'll put out an official call for besties of the show, friends of the show that have information around this. Please let us know. Maybe we'll bring you on for a interviewed segment on the next TCW pod, where you can dive into some of the meat around this particular issue. I mean, listen, if they're really running short on budget and can't afford to do this, maybe stop putting out useless White House memos and spending all that money talking about software security when it really doesn't matter, when you can't even patch base systems like this. So I think for me, it feels like a hit and a miss, a swing and a miss, I guess, as you could call it. So before we run to the next topic, any last commentary on NIST and NVD worries from anybody here on the show?
Hopefully it hurts the government themselves bad enough, that they come back and properly fund it and, don't let this happen again. But again, I have little hope of that outcome, actually occurring. But, that's what I hope happens.
All right. So for the next topic I want to talk about, this is a topic that I think is near and dear to Adrian's heart. So I'm going to have him lead the discussion on this one. The title in our show notes is "Apple Chip Flaws Lets Hackers Steal Encryption Keys." It's a Kim Zetter, I think it's Kim Zetter is her name, written article and piece, and that she researched that Adrian is referencing here. So I'll kick it over to Adrian. Give us the lowdown on hackers stealing encryption keys from the brand new Apple chips.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite categories: vulnerabilities with marketing campaigns. Researchers and academics are going to get really excited about and cause pain for enterprises, but don't really address any risks. So that's the TLDR of this. Is it's you can put this in the same category as Armis's Blueborn Bluetooth vulnerabilities or the Meltdown Inspector vulnerabilities. It's actually very similar side channel attack to that. But the headlines, the breathless headlines, are unpatchable vulnerability in Apple chip leaks secret encryption keys. That's the one from Dan Gooden at Ars Technica. And then Kim wrote hers later, and the title of hers is "Apple Chip Flaw Lets Hackers Steal Encryption Keys." So I'm going to explain this real quick, and then you guys can comment, or ask more questions if I don't do a good job explaining it. But so Meltdown Inspector. And this one, very similar in functionally what they do. If you have just user access, not root, but normal user land access on a host, this allows you to get access basically to pieces of memory, stuff that you shouldn't be able to get access to. There should be segmentation and walls between this data on the computer. And, this is really bad in a cloud environment where you have a multi-tenant environment where multiple people are sharing the same CPU, sharing the same RAM and cache and all those things, because then people in different tenants can see each other's data potentially. But on your own host, the biggest fear here is that you're running some piece of untrusted software or a piece of malware gets on. And even if it doesn't achieve root level access, it can steal stuff. It's not limited to encryption keys. The researchers chose encryption keys as the thing to steal to prove their point, because it makes a really solid point. But the issue is that the way pre-cache works with Apple's new desktop and laptop M series chips, they're able to retrieve some of that data, because it's not just memory locations that are put in the pre-cache, which everything has access to. It's also data from those memory addresses that's placed in the pre-cache. So they figured out they can fetch certain amounts of data, and depending on how big a chunk of data they're looking for, all they need is time to get there. So I think they're able to fetch some keys that are smaller in a matter of minutes, and then I think the longest it took them to fetch keys for was 10 hours at the outset. So very easy to do if you get a piece of malware in somebody's host. But the reason I say it's not really a big, this is more of a academic bug, is I don't see attackers being very interested in this at all. There's a lot of ways you can grab that kind of data without root. There's other ways to get to root. You can use social engineering. You can pop up a dialog box that says, press this button and type in your password. There's 1,000 things they're going to do before they're ever going to use this vulnerability. So you can go back through the long list of Meltdown, Spectre, Beast, Crime, all the SSL, TLS vulns that are out there. I just don't see attackers using this kind of stuff because there's so much low-hanging fruit out there that would be easier that you would try before this. It ends up being an academic vulnerability, but then, like with Meltdown and Spectre, I think in this case the vulnerability, announcing this vulnerability and building a big campaign around it actually causes more damage than it helps, because we lost a bunch of performance. And the first round of Meltdown and Spectre patches didn't even solve the problem. So we had to do another round of patches. So it's very disruptive. And because attackers wouldn't ever choose to use this attack in a real world example, it causes disruption with no upside, no benefit to the community at large. And furthermore, there is no cloud using M-series chips. These are consumer devices. So again, you don't really have multi-tenant environments. It's even less of a concern because these chips are only used in desktops and laptops.
I was about to burn my brand new MacBook Pro. Sounds like maybe I don't need to do that just yet.
Oh my God, Adrian, I wish you would have said nothing. I wish you would have said nothing until Rick came in with a big, melted down laptop that he just lit on fire.
A big slag of titanium.
Yes, that would have made me so happy.
But to your point, Rick, there is a feature in the M3 chip where you can, for certain operations, you can not use the pre-cache, which is going to slow down operations. So if you're doing something heavy, like a Skype conversation, I know generates a ton of encryption keys, it might slow that down, but for other operations, it might be fine. But the M1 and M2 chips, you cannot turn off the pre-cache.
Skype. When's the last time you used Skype? I would cringe if I got invited to a Skype call.
Pretty frequently for our podcast. For one of our podcasts.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. One of the other podcasts that we work on does use Skype occasionally. So we'll not comment about the Skype side of it. But yes, thank God we got off that. But I will say, this is where I will ask super producer Sean to pop up the brand new Nothing Burger image that we're going to create for this. This is a Nothing Burger. It doesn't matter. Why are we wasting our time talking about this vulnerability, Adrian? I agree with you completely. It just doesn't matter. There's very little likelihood. There's very little risk. If risk equals probability times damage, it's just a Nothing Burger. The risk is low. Am I wrong in thinking that?
I'm curious about Rick's take, because he looks a lot at attacker TTPs and stuff like that. Like, do you agree with my thought here?
Yeah, I would be. There's way more. Adversaries want to be able to accomplish their goals with as little effort and as little resources as possible. So I think you nailed it with your observation of there's way other ways to, pop something than to go through esoteric stunt hacking.
Oh, quote of the day. But let's open with that esoteric stunt hacking.
That's great.
I agree completely. This just feels like absolute waste of time. And I expect better I would love to see reporters actually reference people in the know on actual risk and probability and chance of exploit issues, just so that they don't overblow these. And what did you call it? A marketing vulnerability? Because that's really what it is, Adrian.
I get nervous every time I see a marketing campaign. Like, they have a dedicated web page. You can go to you see what the web page is, gofetch.fail, and there's a little dog. So they've got a logo, a dog with a key in his mouth or her mouth. Go fetch, breaking constant time cryptographic implementations using data memory dependent prefetchers.
Oh, great for somebody is familiar. I've seen that dog at Black Hat and DEFCON before
during the dog show.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Tyler picked up on my joke at first there.
100% did not pick up on it. My stupidity is abundant. You had to get me. Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate you getting me there for that cute dog. He's trying to carry the key in his mouth, and he's got a really cute little Carolina bandana on. I can't complain.
But yeah.
All right. So since this is Nothing Burger, I'm jumping to the next topic, unless there's any additional commentary anybody wants to throw in here. If not, we're going to run right into Rick's commentary on No Honor Amongst Thieves, the rise of exit scams. Rick, why don't you hit me with the high level of exit scams? They've been coming fast and furious, at least 2 major exit scams over the last 2 months, last month and a half. Give us a little bit of information about the rise of the exit scam.
Yeah, one thing for context for our listeners and watchers, I've worked at a cyber threat intelligence company, really focused on cyber criminal. So I've kind of got 7 or 8 years of look back experience there. And what I thought I would do is first just kind of level set on an exit scam, go through a couple examples. This is not a new concept at all, but let's do a little bit of a level set. The cyber criminal markets, just like we would use eBay, the criminals have the same type of markets: English language, Russian language. You also have forums out there, so commerce is also conducted in some of the forums as well. There's representatives of various ransomware groups actually on these forums as well. And sometimes they get banned. It's ironic, after a big attack, they may ban chatter for ransomware on the forums. Oh, speaking of a dog, it's a cute one right there, Tyler. But the key thing to think about here is no honor among thieves. You can't trust anyone. And so basically, if you have an eBay-like marketplace and I want to buy, Oxy or a drug of some sort, I put that money into escrow. So just like anyone out here that's purchased a home before, you put money in escrow. A third party holds that money. And that's what's happening here. And then once you receive your goods or service, then that money is paid out to whoever the seller was. So at any time, these marketplaces could be holding lots of money in escrow. Also, vendors will hold the money that they make through their sales in a market in that marketplace as well. Not saying that's the best thing, but just the fact is there's a lot of money that's there. And when there's a lot of money centered in one place, that creates opportunity for the bad guys. And what will happen is there'll be a new market that's created. They'll build up the reputation of the market. They may say, hey, we, trust us, et cetera. They get a lot of users, and then they'll do a rug pull. And basically the way that this generally happens over the past 10 years or so is the service stops working. An admin will come into maybe a forum that's associated with the marketplace and say, we're upgrading software, we're upgrading our infrastructure, things are going to go down. People try to pull their money out of their accounts. They can't pull the money out of the accounts. And then if you start tracking Bitcoin and things along those lines, these accounts get drained that are out there, and the bad guys just close shop, and then they rinse and repeat. So that's kind of the high level on it. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah. So okay. It's just literally a rug pull. It's literally a build up a bunch of money in this escrow account that the criminals own, and then they somehow peace out and leave you behind. Do you have any examples of, in the past where that might have worked in your experience? Have you seen that over the years?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples that I pulled out. There's quite a few, but I chose a couple ones that I'll go through quickly just to have a different flavor. So Silk Road may be familiar with. It was kind of the OG English language forum that was out there. It got taken down in 2013, I think, is when it went down. And so there's a long line of English ones that have popped up since then and come down. But there's one called Evolution Market. And this one happened in 2016, so it goes back a little bit. There, they took 12 million of the crypto that was stored there. The interesting thing was they may have done this because they thought they were under investigation. And this happens quite a bit where they think they're under investigation. They don't want law enforcement to be able to take the crypto. So they pull the exit scam. So that's one that's there. Actually, Andy Greenberg, great journalist. We were talking about journalists earlier.
Yeah,
written a lot of good books. He's written a lot on some of this stuff in the past. The one, we can put it in the show notes for the one that he did on that one. There was another one called Wall Street Market, which was an interesting one in 2019. So a little bit more recent. This market had over 5,000 sellers, 1 million buyers that were out there. The thing about this one was they were actively under investigation by law enforcement. I think they got wind of it. And so they may have accelerated their exit scam, but that didn't keep law enforcement off of them. So these guys got $11 million. But then law enforcement just sped up their investigation and accelerated it, and ended up arresting 3 Germans. And this is important for everybody that thinks about cybercrime. There is this idea that all cybercrime occurs behind Russian borders. That is not the case. There's criminals operating in the U.S. and the U.K. and Brazil, certainly in the Russia, and you're unlikely to have problems there. But this one was quite interesting on that. And the way the guy got busted was he had a bad internet connection, and he thought he was VPN'd in, lost his connection, and then he got logged. Actually, kind of not 100% the same way that Sabu from way back in the day got busted, but OopSec is what we call that one there.
Yeah, I may or may not have, in my gray hat days when I was really young, done exactly that mistake one time.
Well, just like defenders make mistakes, and we take down our networks, or we have that same kind of. I mean, operations is tough if you're on the blue team or the bad guys. So the OopSec thing happens quite a bit. So those are just a couple examples, and that one was Wall Street market most recently there. But then we had the ransomware news coming up. So this is Black Hat and AlphaV.
So what's the correct way to pronounce that?
Black Hat.
For those, we're gonna ask the audience.
Yeah, for those not aware.
In there.
Yeah, AlphaV is ALPHV. So there's no A there. So people call it AlphaV. I just think Black Cat is an easier way to name them. But essentially,
Put it in the comments.
Yeah, let us know how you pronounce it when you brief it out. Hopefully, you have no experience with this group firsthand at all. But this has origins of Eastern European, Russian ransomware operators, and much like what happens with a rug pull. People steal the money and they disappear. You see the same thing happening with ransomware groups. Ransomware group takes a lot of heat. They disappear, they rebrand. And so this group actually has connections to the infamous Colonial Pipeline breach ransomware from 2021, where actually, I don't know if that would have impacted you at all, Tyler, but I know in the Southeast, there was like long lines for gas because there was some problems getting fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. It did affect me. I remember that specifically happening. I want to double click on one thing with you, Rick, on this. When an exit scam is pulled, does the particular reputation of the cyber criminal, go to zero? Do they spend their reputation down to zero by doing this, such that others won't work with them ever again because they're essentially burning their way out? Are they leaving the criminal industry at this time?
I mean, I think law enforcement would have the best view on if people are leaving. But what I would say is it's trivial to create a new legend. Now you have to build reputation for it, right? So when I say legend, you're creating a new identity. So you come up with a new handle, you start, talking to people on forums, you start building credibility, you start sharing, maybe things that you've stolen from environments and things along those lines. So I can tell you from the defender side, this is something that you can do, and you get burned and then you rebuild them. So it's very similar. It's the opposite side of the coin on the bad guy side. So I'd contend that you could do an exit scam, and then 6 months later, you can be up and running with a new identity. Now, maybe some folks know who you are, in your inner circle. I don't think it's tough to do at all.
Yeah. That's absolutely incredible. So, so the pipeline story, continue from where I interrupted you there.
Yeah. So Black Hat and AlphaV, I'll just call them Black Hat. Their rebrands have members from other ransomware groups that have since disbanded. DarkSide is the one that had gone after the Colonial Pipeline, so they get a new name. Now, the way we haven't done it. I don't even think we've talked about attribution on the CyberWhy Weekly. But attribution gets interesting when you start talking about ransomware groups, because you have sales channels, and the sales channels that the ransomware groups use are their affiliate programs. And I think a lot of our listeners will be familiar with this, but if you're not, right, in an affiliate program, you don't want to build the ransomware itself, the cryptor. You want to get it from someone else. You don't have the infrastructure to run it. You don't have the control panels for it. You don't want to do any of that sort of stuff. Even the help desk support, you could outsource all of that stuff. And that's essentially what ransomware as a service is. And the way that money is made there is, I say the mothership. This is just a word I use. I'm not seeing it, more publicly than that. But, the Black Hat mothership basically licenses out their services, their software, And the affiliate, it ranges between 60 and 90% of an extortion the affiliate gets. And that smaller percentage goes to the mothership that's out there. So the affiliates get the majority of the ransomware. And that could be, well, I say ransomware, the majority of the extortion. That could be from ransomware itself. That could be for just stealing the data, because there's other groups that don't even do the encryption. They just steal the data itself. So there's money to be made, but of course it's a force multiplier. So just like cybersecurity vendors have their sales channels and they want to go channel only type of model and things along those lines, here it's a mix. You have your direct model that you do because these ransomware motherships are still doing their own work. And then you have your sales channel. So it's just an opportunity to make more money. But I'll pause. I don't know if anybody else has got some angles on this or some experience to share.
I have zero experience to share on this. It's absolutely simultaneously frightening and exhilarating to hear how this stuff actually works in the background. But I'm interested in digging into the downstream impacts of what the exit scams, or certainly what ransomware, but maybe the exit scams mean to individual enterprise companies that get involved or caught in the crosshairs here. Adrian or Katie, do you have any additional comments? And then maybe we'll throw it to Katie for some downstream effects.
Yeah, I mean, not much. This is really more Rick's area, but I think we've definitely seen organizations turn more business-like here. And they're also risk adverse. So I think it probably behooves them to burn things down and move on more often. But they also invest more in what they're working on. So they're, it seems like they're always working on their next thing and building their next thing and ready to move on to it. So, even when we take these guys down, or if they take themselves down, we don't get the respite that we used to.
Yeah, before I kick it over to Katie for downstream commentary, Rick, you did have some interesting numbers on some of the United Healthcare stuff, and Katie's going to go into downstream issues with things like United Healthcare. But can you maybe give us a little bit of the business metrics that you were able to dig up on some of this stuff based off of what Adrian was talking about, how this is really becoming so business focused and not just a bunch of hacker kids in the closet causing denial of service or defacing websites?
Yeah, I mean, the ransomware as a service. And also the ease of use of paying out extortion via Bitcoin. It's just made the barrier to entry so low. And so where a lot of people just kind of heard this term on exit scam was because of this United Healthcare subsidiary called Optum. And so basically what happened is what is assessed to be an English language affiliate compromised Optum. And then, of course, the mothership again was Black Hat and was letting them use their software and all of their infrastructure. And basically what happened was this affiliate posted on Ramp, and Ramp is a forum, cyber criminal forum, and said that Optum had paid the $22 million extortion, but it went into the Alpha V Black Hat infrastructure. I said Black Cat infrastructure. And then the affiliate's like, okay, when are we going to get our take? And I was looking at the numbers. If you went between 60 and 90%, that affiliate was due to get 13.2 million to 19.8 million. So let's call it 13 to 20 million. That and that was bigger than the examples of the whole markets that I used from before. So that's what their take was. And of course, like other exit scams, the admins, okay, we're working on it, we'll get it. And then meanwhile, that wallet gets drained. Now, the thing that was interesting here is after this, basically, Black Hat acted like the FBI took them down. And so they actually they actually recycled, because the FBI in December did take down their dark website for a short period of time. So they recycled the exact same screenshot, said that the FBI took them down. Law enforcement didn't claim or said that they did not do this. And so it's up in the air. Now, what's going to happen? And this goes back to your question, Tyler. These guys will be able to rebrand and start again anew. And because they were Russians or Eastern European actors targeting English language ones, like, sure, maybe they've burned English language affiliates, but there's still going to be affiliates from other parts there. And if you're in the Russian Federation, like, sure, let's burn those American, ransomware groups that are out there. So this was very interesting from a lot of reasons. The first one I'm aware of that was a ransomware exit scam like this. And then, of course, them acting like the FBI is the one that took them down. Now, this is all the attacker angle, right? What happened for Optum is the affiliate still has the data. The data wasn't deleted. That's if you believe a ransomware crew would actually delete the data that they stolen, which I would not recommend that you take that approach. But there's a whole business angle, and I'm sure folks have seen in the mainstream news the headlines talking about the long tail of the Optum component and people getting paid for services. Or I know Katie's got some perspective on this side too.
Yeah, for sure. So just to level set, Optum tied to United Healthcare, also Change Healthcare, which was the ransomware attack that was reported from February 21st. Change Healthcare, again, rolling up to United Healthcare, aka Optum. So Change is the tech or the billing arm of United Healthcare, and they process apparently about 1 in 3, or they deal with claims for about 1 in 3 patients in the U.S. So for anybody, just a bit of level setting there. So the Change Healthcare systems were taken offline by this cyber attack, reportedly executed by Alpha V, however you want to say that, or Black Cat. And there was a backlog of about $14 billion in payments, which is absolutely insane. So payments were disrupted to doctors, healthcare facilities. Patients were not able to get prescriptions. So flash forward about a month and a half, United Healthcare claimed that their claims systems went back online last Monday. So that's the 18th of March. So a little over a month. United Healthcare had suspended all paperwork required to get approval for insurance coverage for most outpatient services, as well as a review of inpatient admissions for government-backed Medicare plans. So it was this whole quagmire. So we're talking about downstream business impacts. So some of the things that have come out from under the covers because of this, providers and healthcare facilities have since been reporting that billing problems have been around for a lot longer than just this ransomware attack. So obviously, if Black Cat took these systems offline, you would expect there to be some billing problems. But reportedly, there have been providers who have been haggling with United Healthcare for years because their paperwork is onerous. It seems incredibly disorganized. And so there have just been a lot of problems that have surfaced after the breach that were around before the breach that had nothing to do with cybersecurity at all, but are indicative of mismanagement. So a little earlier this month, March 13th, the Department of Health and Human Services launched a probe into whether or not this ransomware attack was actually a breach of PII, protected data for healthcare providers and their patients. So that's going on in the background. Well, meanwhile, there have been several lawsuits, at least 6 as of this last week, that have been filed alleging that United Healthcare has been negligent in cybersecurity protocols for a really, really long time. Going back to December 8th of 2023, United Healthcare filed notice of data breach, with the Attorney General of Montana. So this isn't the first time that they've had problems, but apparently there's not a heck of a lot going on to make things better for United Healthcare and its subsidiaries. So while all of this is happening, providers, healthcare providers, hospitals, facilities have been arguing with the insurers. So all you have to do is Google what's going on with Optum, Change Health, United Healthcare, and you can see that there have been a number of healthcare facilities that have started legal disputes with UHC about payments that they've not gotten from the insurer. So for instance, Mount Sinai Hospital and UHC have been haggling over pay rates, and patients are being forced to go outside of their network, and then their premiums or their out-of-pocket expenses are going up. So everything is sort of being surfaced, and the impetus was this attack and things that the cyber attack in February, and things just getting exacerbated to a point that March 22, there is a senator from Virginia who is introducing legislation that provides financial incentives to healthcare providers to, quote, step up their game for stronger cybersecurity. It's called the Healthcare Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2024, and it's elevating of previous law that existed, or previous rule that existed, and it proposes to implement stricter penalties for these healthcare providers that don't up their cybersecurity game. You know, we know that healthcare is a big target. The only issue here that I see is that this is providers, this is healthcare facilities. It doesn't include healthcare insurers in this at all. So there's a get out of jail free card to an extent.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's problematic.
This is absolutely incredible to me, because we were actually chatting in the back channel too while you were giving the audience the background, and Adrian has his some medical providers, and I don't want to say specific people, so I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but certain his certain medical providers, family members, everybody is asking him about this problem. I personally have, my wife was impacted by this problem and could not get her prescriptions that she had been prescribed. This is a massive downstream issue that really shows you the fragility of our infrastructure. And if something like this can take down prescription delivery for individual people throughout the United States, you can have a really, really big problem here, because this really only just begun. Could you imagine if not just data exfiltration occurred on this scenario, but data destruction and system destruction? How long would we have been without medical care and without medical potentially prescriptions for millions of people?
What if people's prescriptions were changed?
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse, because as people start switching or going out of network and paying out of pocket, so we're talking about a financial issue, then we're talking about an insurer who's been obstinate about payments already. You don't think that they're going to potentially be obstinate about releasing data? It's just going to get compounded.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, this one really scares the ever-loving out of me. Like, absolutely just scares me. It's just so much potential risk for health and well-being of human people within the United States based on how fragile our technology-backed systems are. But I'm gonna put a stopper on this one, because I feel like we could really dive into this one for an entire episode, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to flip gears a little bit, get back to the enterprise storyline, a little bit away from the personal attack storyline. Adrian wrote a really killer report called Water Everywhere, but Not a Drop to Drink. How should we feel about the milestone of 10,000 plus cybersecurity products? This article was very well received when we put this article out last week or the week before. I don't remember the exact date. It looks like March 14th we published it. Adrian, Richard Steinen tracks products and cyber companies, and he has some massive database. And we've talked a little bit both online and potentially live about the aging of products, and when he removes them from his list and things like that. But what I want to hear is a little bit more about your take on a 10 to 20,000 cybersecurity product situation that we have here in globally within cybersecurity, and what that means to enterprises, what that means to practitioners, what that means to buyers.
Yeah, I mean, so from a founder or an investor point of view, it's something to celebrate. If you own stocks in cybersecurity products, it's maybe something to celebrate. But I think for enterprises, for defenders, it's definitely not. I think it's a huge distraction. It's a focus issue. There are literally billions of dollars spent putting this stuff in front of your face. We saw a cybersecurity advertisement during the Super Bowl this year. And I liken it kind of to the health industry as well. A lot of these products are, kind of pitched as quick fixes for things, as, just take this pill and solve your problem. And, they all have to vie for attention. And, the health industry is going after every individual, above 18 years of age. So there's a lot of target there. There's not a whole lot of target. The ratio of companies here to buyers is, I don't know what it is, but was it 5 to 1? Is it 1 to 1? I don't know how many CISOs are out there, but or security buyers, but it's definitely challenging. I don't think, and the tactics to sell to these organizations have changed, but, and get ever more, should I say desperate? I don't know, but it's tough, right? We've all been in marketing. I think, Rick, maybe you too, to some extent, but it's challenging from the vendor side. And I think, this kind of mindset, that we've got all the analysts talking about products. We've got all the vendors talking about and marketing their own products. It's easy to get this kind of product-centric mindset to addressing issues. But when I do breach postmortems, I don't think I've ever come to the conclusion that, these guys were missing a product. If they had only bought this product, it would have solved their problem. But in almost every case, they have products already that would have helped them prevent it, see it, do something about the problem, but they were misconfigured or they didn't know how to use the products. So it's almost process and people issues, that we see when we look at failures, for cybersecurity, related to cybersecurity. So, and I think a lot of security teams I see don't really do much security work. They do busy work generated by products. So a lot of noise comes out of products. I think there's even an argument to be made that the SOC is a symptom of the problem. You have this whole group of people that are just there because these products generate so much noise. And, it's obviously we need products, but less is more. And, we need to ensure that we're actually getting value and efficacy out of the products we have before we go buy the next product. It's a lot like me and my ADHD and my propensity to buy hobbies and gadgets to play around with. And then I never have time to play with them, and I'm on to like shopping for my next one. Unfortunately, at the enterprise level.
Yeah.
So,
Adrian, I would say you're spot on across the board, but I also think that it doesn't stop it being a problem with the enterprise. It's enterprise, it's small business, it's individual human, right. Even individual consumers are flooded with potential products to buy here. That's just the practitioner and operating side from a day-to-day basis, right? We can also take the investor side. We can how many cybersecurity companies have some of these investors invested in? Luckily, some of them go to 10, 20, 30 billion evaluation, or they'd be on a losing streak left and right from the investment side point, or side of the coin, because they're just, spraying and praying at so much tooling. And I think we're just so overheated that I would love to see somebody drain the swamp, to use a government term. I think we got a lot of garbage, a lot of silt sitting in the bottom of the swamp here that needs to be dredged out and thrown away and go from 10 or 12,000 products or whatever we're at.
The market should
be it's a new. You just came up with a new product line, Cyber Dredger.
Well, I think this is why we've heard all of this talk in the last few years over the whole, consolidation in the security market. We heard it really, really loudly for the last few years. It didn't really happen. I mean, enterprises are stuck with this analysis paralysis. Anytime, especially when there's a new category, they feel like they have to evaluate, all the quote top tier players, right? But how long does it take to actually effectively POC 3 to 5 products, right? So it's just and I don't mean to throw it back at you, Tyler, or maybe I do, but part of this is the fault of the investment community, right? As
100%.
long as the
Throw it at me.
investment
You're right.
community is supporting this, companies are going to innovate. People are going to want to take their shot. They've seen some of these small companies grow and be a duo security, and they're like, yes, I want to do that. And as long as investors keep supporting it, and as long as companies can pay their employees, or even if they hire employees and then fire employees, and we've accepted that it's okay in the tech industry to get hired and fired every 2 to 3 years, this problem is going to perpetuate.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the two most interesting companies that I've seen in the last 6 months are companies that actually are solving the POV problem, the sales problem, the visibility of enterprises into cyber tooling to help them pick tools better, faster. And hopefully that'll just, I guess, but what do they say? Bubble the cream to the top, right? Is just kind of get a situation where the cream can be chosen and we can stop with all these useless tools that are expending time and energy. So with that, I want to pop over to our story number 5 of the day. For those of you that are newsletter readers, we always try to put a little fun story as story number 5 of each newsletter. And story number 5 for this month's pod is about some AI-generated spam that's been used on Facebook by spammers and scammers. They're using AI to generate extremely bizarre images and sharing them on Facebook and causing them to go viral. We're not exactly sure to what end they're doing this viral nature, but oftentimes it's coming back through to some click farm or click through situation where they're making money on clicks. The images have been linked to websites with ads that sell very low quality garbage products and are trying to just get as many click-throughs as possible. But I don't really care about the story. That's nothing new. What I'm really excited by, and I'm bringing it up on the screen so we can see Adrian's response in real time, because he has yet to see Shrimp Jesus. So super producer Sean, please bring up the image of Shrimp Jesus right now. I'll tell you what, man, Shrimp Jesus is something else. He's AI generated.
Hallelujah.
Almost in time for Easter.
Yeah,
This is our Easter story.
I think Jesus is literally the first word that came to my mouth when I saw this.
Not in the way it's supposed to be, right?
Oh.
Yeah,
Here's some additional images too. We'll have Sean bring these up before you comment, Adrian. Here's some additional images of Shrimp Jesus underwater. And some of the comments are just pure gold. Amen. I mean, every comment says amen, 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 hallelujah, amen to Shrimp Jesus. I have a new religion. I'm a believer in Shrimp Jesus. So, Adrian, you have the closest to Jesus hair here. What's your comments on Shrimp Jesus?
Wow, that's how we're selecting for reactions here.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of weird stuff has come out of AI. I don't think it's just going to be imagery, and I don't think we're anywhere near the end of it. Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, what the motivation is for creating Shrimp Jesus and throwing it out there. But I mean, it's something like this is definitely likely to get a lot of eyeballs and a lot of views. Just stuff that, normal, well-adjusted, people are just not going to come up with. But AI can. I mean, what was the prompt that generated this? Hey, show me some weird stuff I've never seen before, involving shrimps and Jesus or something.
Shrimp and Jesus.
I don't even know how you come up with like can AI just come up with weird ideas like this if you ask it to, or did somebody come up with this in their head and then have it generated?
It's an excellent question. And I don't know if this particular image that we brought up, the first image that we brought up here on the show, is the original Shrimp Jesus. I'm still not sure, but the overlay is just fantastic. It's the person that posted to Facebook, and their Facebook name is Love God and God Love You. And the comment that overlays Shrimp Jesus is, no one like my artwork, cry face, cry face. So I don't know, man. It takes the cake. I would love to know what the audience can do with some AI-generated imagery of your 4 co-hosts. I would love to see some output comments, et cetera, with great AI-generated imagery of everybody except for Katie, because she's shaking her head no. I'll take one for the team. I'm in. Let's go. Hit me with some AI-generated artwork. But we're going to close the show. We're run out of time. We got to get this thing done before we hit this massive time limit here. So real quickly, I do want to thank the co-hosts, thank the audience for attending and listening and telling your friends. Please subscribe. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Please hit the share button. It really does make a massive difference to growing our audience and to helping us to continue to put this out on a monthly or hopefully even more frequent basis over time. To that end, I would like to thank Rick Holland, the Baron of Barbecue, the Terror of Texas, and the best girl dad outside of yours truly. Rick Holland, thank you so much for coming today.
Good to be with y'all.
Adrian, thank you very much. Our own personal shrimp Jesus and angel of anger, thank you so much for coming on the show today, my friend.
Thanks for sharing Shrimp Jesus with me. It did something.
It did something.
You're converted. And you're converted.
Hallelujah. And Katie, thank you so much for coming on today and keeping a smile on your face and dealing with their curmudgeons that are us old school folk on the call. So
yeah, now I can't get Depeche Mode out of my head. So thank you.
Your personal shrimp Jesus. Okay, with that note, we're going to call it a day. Happy Easter, everybody. This should be coming out hopefully before Easter. You all have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you next month on the CyberWhy Pod. Thank you very much. Thank you.